What's up, guys? You're listening to Thoughts with Sam, the podcast where we take a look at the things of this life and we question what, why, and how. This is a podcast for all ages, for people from all walks of life. And my heart is that we will leave knowing more of the truth, equipping us to lead a life of intention and action. So with that in mind, let's jump right into this week's episode of Thoughts with Sam. What is up, podcast world? It's your boy, Sam Reed. So, here we are. First episode of Thoughts with Sam, the podcast. Genuinely never thought that I would see the day where I get my first episode out, because to be honest, it's been a long time coming now. Hope you enjoy the setup. I've got the fire pit going. I've sat outside. It's absolutely freezing here. It's like, I don't even know, I think it's 0 degrees. Feels like that. I mean, it's 3 minutes to 11 right now on my maiden voyage for the podcast, and I'm just really stoked to be here, to be honest. And I just really hope this is going to be, something that continues, and I can look back on this first episode and just see how the Lord moved, and really just to create something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and that I've sort of wished that I had 3 or 4 years ago. Now, on this first episode, as you can see, Thoughts with Sam podcasts. So I figured I would just do a bit of a talk about my heart behind the podcast, what a podcast is, outline a few ground rules for what I'm going to be doing long term, and sort of how these things are going to go. So bear with me. I'm going to be learning and thinking about things as I go. I will be a bit rough around the edges for the first couple of episodes probably, but things will improve and change over time. I am also recording for those of you on Spotify and podcast places. This is a YouTube video as well, so all of you on YouTube, hello. All of you on Spotify and other podcasts, hello. You are absolutely so welcome on this podcast. So I figured I would start by doing a bit of a mission statement, because first episode, I think it's good just again to set where I hope I'm heading, and to give you an overview of what you're buying into if you are here. Now, I hope these videos will hopefully, and the podcast episodes, I'm aiming for about 20 to 30 minutes. I want them to be, things that you see come into your inbox, or your subscriptions, or your what's new on Spotify, and to see it as a weekly thing that you are looking forward to listening to, and you get real value out of. And I think that's done through consistency and I guess things that you're used to, and that's through structure, but then also through topics that are going to be interesting and things that genuinely are going to be impactful to your life. So I'll read my mission statement, and then we'll go through a bit of the structure, and then hopefully by then we'll have a bit more of an idea of where we're going to be moving to. But let's start with the mission statement that I've written out, because I feel it's important to have it as more of a formal thing than just a random thought, even though this is Thoughts with Sam. So here we go. My mission statement for this podcast. My goal with this podcast is to first and foremost glorify God. And I truly believe that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. Secondly, my aim with this podcast is to inspire a generation of people who think deeply and intentionally about things that matter. Things that, if we get them, will have eternal consequences on our souls, on our minds, on our families, on our workplaces, in our every moment of every day. I believe that thinking is the catalyst to change, the engine that moves the wheels of development and maturity. It's hard to change if we don't think, reflect, or know how to ask good questions, and we live in a time and in a generation that is losing how to think. with cancel culture so prevalent and censorship at an all-time high, many are afraid to speak up for what they believe, and we're now even afraid to think. Instead, we now live in a time where scrolling for hours on TikTok is commonplace, where attention spans are getting lower and lower, and thinking really doesn't matter. We don't talk about deep things. We aren't encouraged to understand how the world works or why we exist or where we're going. I believe there is a need, and I'm not going to sit around and watch. The Lord has blessed me with a brain that can't switch off from thinking. I once saw it as a curse, but now I see it as a gift. So who is this podcast for? Genuinely, I hope it's for everyone. That's my heart at least. But a better question might be, who isn't this podcast for? I want to be clear, this is not a podcast for the easily offended. To think deeply means risking comfort. Delving into hard topics can be painful and bring up all kinds of emotions. But if you're willing to press through and stand with me in the hard places and in the hard topics, welcome aboard. I am to create a place where parents can comfortably send their kids to hear about social media, to think about bullying or evangelism, or whether they should play football on a Sunday instead of going to church. I want to create a platform that university students can tune in to be encouraged, where I share my experiences of finding my first job, or dating at uni, finding the right church, even for 70 and 80-somethings seeking insight into how the younger generations think. I believe that the Bible is God's inerrant word, useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. It will be the ultimate guide by which I explore this reality. I don't want you to believe what I think. I want to try and understand and see what God thinks. And I want you to be able to see it for yourself. Now, I am only 23. I don't know the answers to everything, but what I do have is the desire to learn, to live with my eyes wide open, and to unashamedly think. I know that speaking and thinking out loud can leave a target on my back, but I please ask, give me the benefit of the doubt. I hope you see that my heart is to explore life's treasures and to help equip everyone to see more of God's glorious purposes for their lives, for now and for eternity, through his grace and for his glory. Amen. So, that is my mission statement. That is what this podcast is for. That's where we're going to be heading. Now, I am having issues with my microphone, so I am going to just try. Oh, there goes my phone. Told you this is going to be a little bit all over the place. I think that's a little bit better. I just want to set up a bit higher because I don't really want to be stooping over all the time. But I also want you to be able to see me. Not that I look great right now because I've got a massive bar light here. But yeah, this whole podcast is about thinking. So some of it will be thinking out loud and seeing where the Lord takes me, really. But a lot of it I'm going to be preparing beforehand because I really want this to be, I care deeply about these things and I want to be prepared. I want to be able to give good wisdom and advice, and I believe praying over that and seeking the Lord's wisdom is ultimately where we're going to get the most out of this experience, and I'm going to get the most out of this experience. So before we move on, I'm going to quickly pray for us, and I'll then outline a little more about what the structure is going to be, more practical things, and we'll get into a bit of a thought on podcasts today. So let me pray and we'll go into it. So Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this community. I thank you for, Father, giving me the gift of, creativity and the desire to, make this podcast and make this YouTube channel. Lord, you've been so gracious to me and leading me down paths of righteousness, but also, Lord, along hard paths too. Lord, this life that I've lived has not been easy. I've gone through many ups and many downs, but Lord, you've given me grace in order to see your glory through it all. And Lord, you've seen I've written so many lamentations and journal entries, and I've lived with my eyes wide open. And Lord, I ask you now, Lord, as the great God and great Father that you are, Lord, if this is your will for this to be a podcast that grows and develops and flourishes, Lord, that people may find more of you. Lord, would you bless it? Would you anoint it? Would you use it for your glory? Lord, help take me out of the picture. Lord, it's not about me, but Lord, I wish that, and I hope that people would see you through me, and that, Lord, they'd see that my heart is about glorifying you. And Lord, I just pray over everybody listening now as well, Lord, that they would be just filled with a fire fresh, Lord, by your Spirit. Lord, that they would, even if they're not a Christian, if they don't know you yet, Lord, that they would see more of you through these podcasts, and they'd hear from your word, and their heart would be illumined to your truth. So Lord, I just pray over this next 15, 20 minutes, or however long we're here for, Lord. Lord, but it'd be fruitful. May we learn more about you and think more about your word and your world. In your precious name, I pray. Amen. So, now, the structure for these episodes, as I was preparing this setup earlier on, I was having a few thoughts, as I do. And I think the general structure I wish and I hope to have going forward, and we'll play with this a bit, will be a three-pronged approach. Good things come in threes, especially the Trinity. I was going to make a joke then about Jews, but anyway, yes, I've lost my train of thought because I've just made an outrageous statement. Anyway, we'll go back to what I thought. 3 points. So, first of all, what? So, we got the subject, podcasts. This could be anything. Podcasts. Sex before marriage. Sex in general, probably. It's a better title. Calvinism. Predestination. Even to things like mortgages, debt, bullying, betting. You know, there's just things that, like, literally everything in life we can question and ask, like, first of all, what? So, stay on topic. What? What is it? That's the first bit. We're going to go through, we're going to do a definition. Okay, I've got a lovely woman called Serena here. So, I will do that in a minute once I've outlined these 3 prongs, but we will do a definition of podcasts, and we'll do that for every single topic we hit. Now, the second is why. We've got what, now why. So podcasts, for example, today's episode. What is it? Then why? Why does it matter? What are the reasons as to why we're even thinking about it? What's the eternal implications, and why is it important? Why is it bad? Why is it good? And we'll seek biblical wisdom on that. We'll open the Bible where appropriate, but we'll also, hopefully, I'll intersperse with some good quotes from other people who, either they're podcasters themselves or they are people, Christians who've gone before us. And I really think there is wisdom in looking back and looking at people who have lived lives that have been, so influential. And, people may call me traditional or old school, but there's something about the past which there's a reason why it still exists now. Why cliches, for example, people will say cliche and it's a bad thing. Like, there's a reason why cliches are cliches. It's because most of the time they're true. It's the same thing with stereotypes. Like, the reason stereotypes exist is because more often than not it is commonplace. I don't think they're bad things. I think when we assign value to them, maybe it can be a problem, but they're a really good way to analyze the world and to see patterns and similarities and things. So cliches and looking back and having traditional, history and what's been passed down, often the things that remain are the things that are going to be most influential. Doesn't mean everything that's passed down is good. We still question, we still think about things, but my aim is to take as much wisdom from the past, looking into the future and really testing it and seeing if it will stand the test of time and continue to help us as we live in this new world and new generation. So that's my heart behind why. And then finally is how. What, why, and how. And how is the practical implications. So how can I use this in my life, and how do we move forward with maybe this new thought, or just recapping really what we've learned and how we can move forward into our daily lives with our new the new concepts. And it doesn't mean that after every podcast we're going to have all the answers. That isn't, it's just a chance to be able to think deeply, and we might even do 2 episodes on the same thing if we need to go into it into more detail, or the Lord reveals something to me as we're going and I'm thinking, man, we need more time over this. And this will also feed into chats with Sam as well, because there might be a topic that we hit on and we want to get someone on who knows a lot more about that topic than I do. So whether that's a preacher or a pastor or a professional person, if we get to that point where the Lord still sustains this podcast that long, obviously they're my hopes, they're my goals, they're my aims. Might not mean we get there, but at least at this moment in time, that's what I'm aiming for. Now, to in the mind of keeping this to time, and I realise this is just an inner monologue, but I want it to be interesting, and I want it to be something that you enjoy listening to rather than you see it as a burden. And I hope that you are listening and you're engaged and you're interested in what we're going to be talking about. But today's episode, as I said at the beginning, is going to be on podcast. So let's start with the what, and we're going to hand it over to Serena, who's going to give us our definition. Take it away, my love.
A radio program that is stored in a digital form that you can download from the internet and play on a computer or on an MP3 player.
Thank you, Serena. What an absolute legend she is. And you're going to be hearing more from her as we continue on in these podcasts. But yeah, as you've quite rightly heard in that, and I'm just going to pull up my definition to make sure that we are all singing off the same hymn sheet. As you can see, and I've just got a Timu ad, that's not great. There we go. A radio program that is stored in a digital form that you can download from the internet and play on a computer or an MP3 player. Now, obviously, that's very vague. Ultimately, I'm going to apply that definition to the podcast that I listen to. Now, ultimately, it's something that we can all relate to. I think podcasting has boomed over the last couple of years, and I think it's something that's very trendy. Now, that wasn't really why I started one. I wanted to do one ages ago. I actually started by doing radio shows when I was about 12 years old. I also used to do drama as well, so I think I enjoy public speaking. But ultimately, this definition, ignore the radio program bit, but I guess the MP3 player bit, the computer bit, it's the digital form, the fact that we can actually listen to people think and talk and unpack topics in a longer form, and I guess just like we can tap it into a person's thought process. It's a little bit like sermons. I think sermons are so important. Preaching is so important. I think the art of preaching is unfortunately being lost. I've just defined a little bit of the what a podcast. That's just simple definition. Obviously, we've got that one there, but for me, let's define it as it's something that you listen to, and I believe something that you listen to. Obviously, not just music, something that you listen to, which helps you think, and I guess leaves you changed after. And that's my loose definition of podcast, but I know for me it's often something that we listen to bring comfort or to fill time when you're driving to work or walking through the city, or it's that comfort, I think, of hearing another human being think about something, especially in this lonely generation that we have. So let me just get into a bit more of a thinking process now I've got the definition out of the way. I do think that that preaching, for example, and many podcasts are on preachers and sermons, that art form is being lost, and that's why I think it's really important to listen to older sermons. And I'll plug a few here because I think it's really important to share resources that have helped us. So for me, Desiring God and Pastor John Piper has been such an influential person in my life. There's one sermon, are finding, your life is lacking purpose, I will just plug one. It's called Don't Waste Your Life. And if you go on YouTube, I'll leave it in the show notes as well. Just such a powerful message. And another preacher as well, and a great podcast, because I also want to plug some as well for you guys to listen to, as well as mine. Ones that have really helped me is Ask Pastor John. So that's with Desiring God. And then another wonderful sermon or preacher is Jonathan Pokluda, who has been such an influence in my life. And it's funny how they're both called JP. And another one, again, is Jordan Peterson, and his podcast, just they're all JP, and it's quite funny how the world works and the Lord works like that. But if you're JP and you're listening to this, well, God bless you. You're a JP. But that's Becoming Something with Jonathan Pokluda, and that's also on Spotify and on YouTube as well. So both really, really great podcasts. But I think going back to what I was saying about preaching, I think the expository preaching, the preaching that takes a point and unpacks it and helps you think and helps you see why somebody has got to where they've gotten to, and seeing the realities behind the world, thinking deeply. I think that's just so important, and that's why preaching's so important. So part of this podcast is going to be taking some of those ideas of sermons and preachers and the things that are important about those things, and sort of unpacking them into specific subjects. So these won't be preachers, but I think you'll get hints of that in this podcast. And I guess this final point on this section of I guess, why, thinking about just, why we actually really enjoy podcasts and what the implications then may be moving forward. So I think why we enjoy podcasts is because we do now live in a generation which is so digitized. So human connection and sitting by the campfire and chatting about things is so, I guess it's rare, isn't it? I've got a nice little, you can see the smoke. I've got a little fire here. So we're sort of sitting by the campfire together. It's now 11 o'clock, so I should have my cold brew or my cocoa. That would be great, but I don't. I'm freezing. But yeah, I digress. Just those, campfire type stories that we all, maybe when you were a kid, you went on like a youth camp or you went on a school camp. I know I did. And you'd sit and you'd listen to your teacher tell a long story about something interesting, and maybe you got bored and went to bed. But there's something joyful about listening to another human unpack their experience and their stories, and there's something quite comforting about that. I believe the Lord made us to enjoy community. He said right in the beginning in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. And I think it's really easy for us to, although we're so connected on the internet and through Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and all of that, we're also so disconnected. So we are looking for human connection, and podcasts are a really easy way to get that. You can listen to multiple people having a conversation, and you can feel like you're part of it. And I guess that's partly my heart with this, is that those people who are lonely and who don't have many friends, or don't really have anybody to talk to, you can listen to this and you can see that you can hear that you're known, that I see you. I hope to be able to, especially on the YouTube, like reply to as many comments as possible. My email's on there as well. Feel free to email me. I want to build a community here. It's not just about me. It's not, I don't want to create a disconnected platform. But I do believe podcasts are a great way of connecting and thinking, and the implications for that can be massive. And I guess just finally on this, before we move to sort of, how we're going to apply it moving forward, I think genuinely podcasts can be really healthy, but they can also be unhealthy. There are certain podcasts I know that I've listened to in the past, which, they can give you advice and they can give you insight, but at the same time, they can also be just to tickle our ears and entertain us on things which maybe aren't God's best. I know one I used to listen to quite a lot when I was going through quite a tough time, and it sounds quite bad. It's called Call Her Daddy. And it would be talking about like just some pretty debaucherous things. And I know it was just insight into Alex Cooper's mind, but at the same time, it's like, it's really easy with podcasts to on one hand, be in a Christian bubble, which I don't want this to be. I want this to be for non-Christians as well. People who are just exploring life, but also I want it to be comforting. I want it to be a nice little place for people to listen and find my voice soothing, and listen to some stories that I had today. I went to see my granny today. That was nice. I'll give some stories in future episodes about what I've got up to in my day, but there is something nice about that. But on the flip side, there's also, people that we listen to, and it's a waste of time, or it's just to fill a void. And, I think it's important to be careful and to test, what's going into our ears. Same thing with music. What are we listening to? We can always, and I'll probably do a podcast on this about music and what type of music we should listen to. Is it good? Is it bad? And what does it do to us? Our ears, our eyes are so important, like our mouths are. Being healthy physically starts with what you put in your body, and I think it's important to constantly check and think about, what am I listening to? What am I investing in? And am I maybe just listening to loads of podcasts because I enjoy filling my brain with information? I think it's important to do something with the information that we get, and that's my heart. So, to finish this off and to round it out before the 30-minute mark and hitting my aim, how do we apply this? So I guess my challenge is, if you don't listen to a podcast currently, that's stupid because you're listening to this one. But if you don't have a routine of listening to podcasts, I'd say, try it out. I know I listen to, the ones I listen to often, they're on Mondays or Fridays. So this one's going to be released on a Monday, so I hope you can start your week with it. And I think it's really useful, again, when you're walking or driving, listen to some sermons, listen to some preachers, and I guess, again, with the podcast, just think about, are you consistent with it, and is it actually useful? Are you getting value out of it? I know I've gone through many podcasts where I listen for a bit and then I sort of don't listen anymore, maybe because they're too long. And I guess I just encourage you, think about it, be intentional, maybe do a little bit of a list of the podcasts you listen to, and think about, are you using your time well, or are they really benefiting you? And just think a little bit deeply about them. And I hope this one is part of those that you enjoy and continue listening to. And ultimately, we're nearly at time, so I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'll leave the ones that are important, or the ones that I'd love to encourage you to listen to, in the show notes and in the description on YouTube. But ultimately, guys, it's just been a real pleasure, and I'm so glad that I can start this little journey as my hands are freezing. And there's this very POV setup out here, and I probably will do it inside next time, but I figured it would be cool for my first one to do it outside, like a little campfire. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Thoughts with Sam. Like I say, we will continue to develop it, we'll continue to grow it. Any feedback would be great. Leave a comment or send me an email. Again, I'll leave my email in the show notes. I may not be able to do that for loads of time, as I guess more and more people listen, if that's God's will. I'll try and reply as much as I can. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure to start this journey, and it's really cool to see where it goes. That's been podcasts. That's been my thoughts. Go well, and God bless you. You've been listening to the Thoughts with Sam podcast. New episodes are released every Monday, so tune in next week for a new episode of Thoughts with Sam.